Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church in Columbia, South Carolina, where we're part of the ELCA. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. There's an old story about a young couple who were having their first fight, and it was a big one. After a while, the husband said, "When we got married, you promised to love, honor, and obey." His bride replied, "I know, but I didn't want to start an argument in front of all those people at the wedding." Brides and grooms aren't the only ones who struggle with that word, obey. We'd much rather go our own way, do our own thing, and decide for ourselves our course of action. Obedience often feels so confining, so restrictive, so binding on our freedom to do as we please. Probably obedience is fine with us if we are the ones making the rules and everybody has to kowtow to our wishes. But when we have to submit to the demands of others on us, it doesn't feel so good. I have a friend, and I don't really like to ride with him in a car. He's not a bad driver, but he simply refuses to speed. Now, I'm not an excessive speed breaker, but if I'm out on the highway and the speed limit is 70, I'm more likely doing something like 75. Not my friend. He obeys the law. If he's driving, it seems to take forever to get where we are going, but he doesn't get in a hurry. He obeys the law. There's that word again. That confining, restrictive, binding word. Only somehow it never seems that way when we talk about Jesus. This week we are focusing on traits of Jesus, and one of those is that Jesus was God's faithful and obedient Son. Maybe put another way, Jesus sought in everything to do the will of God. That's so hard for us. We often seek to do everything by the will of ourselves. But Jesus lived in full obedience to the Father, even when it meant suffering and death. Perhaps the place to best see this trait in Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. Luke describes it this way. He came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not come into the time of trial." Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Of course, this is the prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane that Jesus gave just prior to being arrested and crucified. The thing is, he knew what was coming. Jesus knew and had told his disciples repeatedly that he would be arrested, be crucified, and on the third day rise. He knew it was coming. No one would want to go through the pain and agony of crucifixion. That's why the Romans used it and made it a very public event. With just one look at someone being crucified, you knew you didn't want to have anything to do that would put you up there. It's a slow, agonizing death that sometimes took several days. Throw in some public humiliation at the same time, and crucifixion is something you definitely want to avoid. To show you how bad it was, the root of the word crucifixion is found in the word excruciating. It's where that word excruciation comes from. But Jesus prayed, "Your will be done." Far too often we include that in our prayers as something of a tagline, something we know we're supposed to say, but I sometimes wonder if we really mean it. Jesus did. His prayer was sincere. He was God's obedient Son, even to the point of death. Still, his obedience somehow doesn't feel confining or restrictive or binding. No, Jesus went willingly, offering himself in God's plan to save the world. Unfortunately, our obedience isn't much like Jesus's. We so often look for the limits of our love, for what little we can get by with and still be in God's graces. How much richer would our lives of faith be if we willingly gave ourselves to obeying God in joy rather than in confinement? What does all this teach us about trust and submission to God? In what areas of your life might God be calling you to greater obedience? These are tough questions to take seriously, but let me point you to the very first psalm when it speaks of those who do follow God's way. The psalm speaks of those following God's word being like trees planted by streams of water. Now that would be a happy and fulfilled tree with access to nourishment anytime it desired. For us, obedience to God is like that. Find true joy, trust, and obey. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.